for the first time in 2020, we can say it's race week, and a lot has happened since Abu Dhabi, and we are here to preview the Australian Grand Prix for 2020. We are powered by the F1 Chronicle. Visit f1chronicle.com for news, reviews, and opinions on all things F1. Today, it'll be me hosting, Louis Edwards, and with me, our sports journalist, Dev Tyagi.
Hey, everyone.
F1 expert, Alex Booth.
Hello.
And McLaren superfan, Owen Davies.
Hello.
So, we'll start with the latest news that has come out from Formula One, and that is the fact that the Bahrain Grand Prix will be done behind closed doors with no fans. So, Dev, what do you think the impact of having this sort of race with behind closed doors is going to be for the Bahrain Grand Prix?
I think it sucks, first of all. I don't think such a thing has ever happened in the history of Formula One, has it? Not in the modern history of the sport, not to my knowledge. If the reason is because of the contagious virus and the extremity that can cause, then I think, I don't know, the administrators would have definitely done the right thing. But purely from a fan perspective, I think that's the last thing we would have expected, in terms of facade news right at the front of the season. So I think it's, in a way, it's going to be a ghost race. For sure, it would be televised on TV, but I don't know, how does that spectacle feel? Not very cheery, is it?
No, it certainly will be a very strange atmosphere around the track. But Alex, we're lucky that this race perhaps even go ahead after Bahrain government said that they won't be allowing sort of people from Italy to come to their country, especially without quarantine, and having two Italian teams in the sport. Do you think that we're lucky that we're even having a Bahrain Grand Prix this year?
Well, from a fan point of view and certainly a personal point of view, it's nice that the race is still going ahead as of today. I feel sorry for the Bahraini public who are going to go there, and for spectators travelling from abroad. It's very sad for them. There's still a question mark, as you mentioned, about the Italian teams actually being allowed to go there. And if that is the case, then the FIA already said that if all the teams can't make it, the race will go ahead. But I suppose with the situation being the way it is, I think the behind closed doors is probably the only thing they really could have done. At least it still gives us a race. And it means that we won't be having any camera shots to the crowd, unfortunately. But at least the race is still going ahead as of now. And that's what all those F1 fans want to see. We don't want to see races being cancelled. So I suppose it's probably the best thing.
Yeah, talking of races that might actually be cancelled, we're still very unsure of what's going to happen with the Chinese Grand Prix. So, I mean, with it being still under sort of the postponed, we've seen MotoGP cancel races. Do we reckon that the Chinese Grand Prix this year will be cancelled?
It seems highly likely. I kind of can't quite see how they can shoehorn that into the calendar at another time. It just seems a bit crazy. So I think what will be interesting to see is if other people copy what Bahrain are doing, because I know that Bahrain, the event organisers, can probably handle that financial hit of not having spectators at the race, but whether the other rounds of the championship can afford to do that, copy that move, and be as proactive as Bahrain is, that's going to be interesting.
So going from cancelled races and postponed races, we've got a new race coming to the calendar this year, Zandvoort. We've seen Max Verstappen already drive around it. So, Dev, from your sort of perspective, if you've seen the video of Max Verstappen going around it, what is your sort of initial thoughts of the new Zandvoort?
I haven't really seen the video of Max Verstappen, to be frank, but for sure, having a new circuit, having a circuit which was there in the past and then coming back onto the calendar, I think that should be absolutely brilliant. It'll be another domain where the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull can completely go nuts and give us a race to remember. Having said that, what would actually be impressive, if it can be possible at the end of the day, is to see a bit of a Ferrari fight back, but we don't know from what we've seen this far, the disappointing winter tests. I mean to say, but yeah, definitely there's going to be a fantastic opportunity to see some amazing racing, and yeah, I think the onus would be on the youngsters to deliver. The experienced heads have always been doing things. They have been dominant as hell. I don't know. Something in me says that 2020 just could be the year for Red Bull, a massive leap for Red Bull, because so far what we have seen has always been a Ferrari versus Mercedes. They take any circuit, but this year I think it could be a lapse from Ferrari, and on every single opportunity, you could have Red Bull make most of Ferrari sandbagging. And this could happen on this track as well.
Another race, which of course is new, is Vietnam. Alex, I don't know if you've seen any sort of renderings of the track and sort of initial. So how do you think Vietnam is going to fit into the calendar? What type of race do you think it's going to be? And how do you think it's going to be perceived in the future?
Well, from what I've seen of it, there's a very long straight there. It's a bit like, it's not quite like it, but I think that, there's a straight in Baku, which allows the cars to get up to a really high speed and then overtake it to the first corner. I know Baku's a little bit weavy before the start-finish line. I think Vietnam, I can see the circuit being very flat. I think it could be, I don't want to be a prophet of doom, but I think it's a bit more like another Sochi, to be honest. A bit of a track with not a lot of character in it. I think it's probably got the potential to be a race that it could deliver. I might be wrong, but my first impressions of it aren't that great, to be honest. But we'll see. It's somewhere that F1's never been before. It's nice to see new countries coming in. But I'm not really confident that circuit will lead to very exciting race, to be honest. I think it'll be a case of cars just flying past each other down a really long straight and not a lot of action elsewhere.
Now, from on to the present into the future, 2023, we might see a Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. So, Owen, for Formula One, Saudi Arabia, I assume, is going to be a huge market that F1 has sort of scouted out. But do you think it's a right move for Formula One to go to Saudi Arabia?
It's going to be controversial, isn't it? And I think it kind of reflects, the oil world, and do we think that's as relevant going forward as a lot of the manufacturers are moving towards the electrification of vehicles and things like that? There's question marks about human rights. There's question marks about the way they treat women and things like that. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things to work out there. Whether that happens or not, I kind of would be a bit surprised if it did, to be honest.
Right. So let's get all the controversial stuff over and let's just focus on this Grand Prix that's coming up in a week's time now. So the Australian Grand Prix is always our first opportunity to see how the cars are actually performing and see some of the sandbags lifted, potential sandbags lifted from this F1 testing. So to start off with the reigning champions, Mercedes looked very strong in testing, and Australia's been quite a good track for them in the previous few years. So Dev, how do you see the two Mercedes drivers getting on at the Australian Grand Prix?
Well, I think there's little doubt about the fact that those will be the two cars to beat this weekend. You would be really surprised if something completely contrary happened in the qualifying. Having said that, we've also gone on to see that the person with the fastest time during the testing doesn't actually end up becoming the world champion, but that's been the dominant discourse of the day. By that, we should not expect Valtteri Bottas to step back. He would remember the sensational win with which he started his season last year. I think he would be hoping that he would want to fire the opening salvo by taking the first win. But will it going to be easy against a man who knows, that he's in the form of his life? That's Lewis Hamilton. I don't think there's going to be too much of a deterrent which other teams can come up with in terms of dissuading Mercedes from winning it. But yeah, as I said, let's hope for a good fight from Ferrari and Red Bull if that's possible. It should actually happen. It should be a better.
Sorry. So you bring up a good point there. Sort of like Bottas started his 2018 season off very well. Australia seems to be slightly an interesting track for Lewis Hamilton. Doesn't always get off to the best of starts in his F1 season. So, Alex, do you reckon he will try and rectify this year and try and come out with a very strong performance?
Well, he always goes well in qualifying there. I think he's held pole position there for the last ever since the hybrid era. I think every time we've gone there, he's got pole. But he hasn't won there since 2015. It was close, I suppose, in 17 and 18, but the Ferrari got ahead of him in pit stop. There's no question that Mercedes are the favourites going into it. But it depends on whether Bottas will replicate his drive from 2019. Hamilton will be determined that he doesn't. And we'll have to see. I'm expecting Mercedes' main rivals to be Red Bull, actually. I think they could probably spring up a little bit of surprise. Ferrari, there's the question as to whether they are actually standby or they are facing troubles. My fear is that it's more towards the latter. So I don't really expect much from Ferrari. I think it's looking highly likely that it's going to be another Mercedes victory there. But we'll see. It'll always be a surprise, and Melbourne's not given us a few surprises in the past.
And finally, Owen, sort of, will Bottas be able to replicate? I think he finished, something like 30 seconds ahead of Lewis at one point, and he was absolutely storming. Do you reckon he needs that sort of start again if he really wants to mount the challenge for the 2020 title?
Yeah, I mean, this sort of one criticism that people have kind of leveled at Lewis is that he never kind of starts a championship campaign very well. I don't know if that's fair, but I think Valtteri's been told, you know, if you want to have any hope of challenging, you have to come out of the blocks, you know, all guns blazing. So I'm sure Valtteri will be really fired up. It would be a massive surprise if it wasn't a Mercedes on pole position. I have to agree, Lewis, you know, he always qualifies well in Australia, so I think he'll probably win that battle, but whether he wins the race battle will be the one interesting thing to watch, because I think ultimately the victory will be played out between those two drivers. I think they've got such a good advantage over the rest.
Yeah, they certainly seem to already have this huge advantage from the likes of Ferrari, who we don't know exactly what to expect from them coming into this race. It did look like their performance in testing was a bit shoddy, but we never know. Mercedes rocked up to Melbourne last year and absolutely blitzed the field. So, Dev, do you reckon Ferrari have what it takes to turn testing misfortune into a possible race win in Melbourne?
Well, why not? They've also become habitual of becoming the sentimental favorites before entering a Grand Prix and exiting a Grand Prix. Even last time around, it was Vettel who qualified third, and I think, if I'm not wrong, Leclerc was fifth. So first thing they would do is that they go back to the drawing board and they look up their own stats. I think they weren't really that bad, not at least in the qualifying battle. So first thing would be to get everything right, not to put a foot wrong on the big day, which is the big day, is before the D-Day on Sunday. And then build up from there. And this is a track where I believe Vettel has at least 4 to 5 wins against his name. So he would hope for, I don't know if miracle is the right word. Are they doing that bad on the race day? How good is their race pace? A lot of questions would be unfurled at that very moment, but there is no doubt that Ferrari can do well. It's just about having the pace on that day. What do you think?
Yeah, so Alex, you were talking earlier about the fact that Red Bull could be Mercedes' biggest challenge. Do you think that's what Ferrari's focus will be on this weekend to make sure that they're in front of the Red Bulls, or do you think challenging Mercedes should be their main goal?
Challenging Mercedes should be their main goal. Whether they can actually achieve that is probably another matter. I think that the most realistic thing they can do is see if they can be Mercedes' main challenger and not actually lose out to Red Bull. We've seen in the past teams have struggled in testing. They've got to Melbourne and done okay. There was one year, I think McLaren when Lewis Hamilton was still at McLaren, they'd looked shoddy in testing, and they rocked up in practice in Melbourne and was second. So testing's not always an exact guarantee of what the pecking order is. But I don't believe that Ferrari are going to repeat what Mercedes did last year, when it looked like Mercedes weren't looking that quick in testing, or certainly not as quick as Ferrari were looking at originally. But then as soon as Melbourne came around, Mercedes were a lot quicker than the rest of the field. I don't think that's going to help with the case for Ferrari. So yeah, I think that Ferrari's main goal as a team is to be Mercedes' main challenger. But I somehow don't think that's going to be the case. I think their objective is going to be trying to stay ahead of Red Bull, to be honest.
Yeah, it's going to be potentially a big challenge, but Ferrari have got a lot of what we think is a lot of work to do at the moment. So do you think Ferrari are up to the task, considering their pretty poor attempts at the title mounting a title challenge over the last few years?
Yeah, I would never write a team like Ferrari off, because they've got a huge amount of resources and strength and depth behind them. They've actually got quite a lot going on off track. They've got the kind of coronavirus situation playing out. They've got a battle with the 7 teams about their fuel system irregularities last season. So they've got to kind of stay focused on this year. It'll be interesting, because last year their testing strategy was to kind of show their hand, and they kind of won the winter testing championship, if you like. And then this year it's been very different. It's been very, very low key, and we haven't really seen what that car can deliver. So there's still potential for them to be quick, actually. But I guess we have to wait and find out.
Mm. Now on to Red Bull, the potential dark horse for this championship. We saw some good outings in testing, potentially some good race pace, and good just one lap speed from Red Bull. Do you think they have? Well, Dev, do you think they have a good chance of coming away with some good points away from Australia?
I think absolutely. I think the biggest positive that they have in their armory for this weekend, if I could put it this way, is the dominant form of Max Verstappen at this track. Last year, he finished in third, and that wasn't the worst day for them, to emerge third ahead of the 2 Ferraris. Just behind the 2 Mercedes was a very good start. First thing they would want is to either do a repeat of that, and in fact have their chances at breaking into the top 3. In fact, why not second? Because they would know that one among the 2 big opponents, which is Ferrari, are finding themselves in a bit of a challenging position. So maybe it's time to step up the gas and hit it hard. So probably the Australian Grand Prix is just going to see something very special from Red Bull.
It's Alex Albon's first Australian Grand Prix in a Red Bull. He did have a very good finish to last season. Alex, how do you think he's going to be approaching this season, going into Melbourne, trying to sort of be the best driver he can so he can secure that seat for 2021?
He's got some testing behind him, which he didn't have when he was just into Red Bull last season. He knows the team now, and he knows his target, and he'll be going for it. Whether he can, his first priority is going to be if he can challenge Max Verstappen. I'm not sure whether he's at that level yet. We never know. I mean, he could be a revelation. As a fan, I hope that he does. I hope that he is in Red Bull for the long term. And it would be nice for him to succeed. Might be a bit too much to expect in the first half of the season. But the best he can do, he can hope for, is just get to the end of the races. He needs to get that first podium, which he's very likely to do in Australia. Red Bull themselves, it rests on Honda, I think. Last year it was uncertain how it was going to work out. It worked out very well from the start. They have a year behind them. So it's kind of looking good, I think.
So also, speaking of Max Verstappen, potential 2020 title challenger this year against Lewis Hamilton and Bottas. Just basically, what do you think Max Verstappen needs to do coming into this weekend to really show that he means business for the 2020?
Well, I think he just needs to do what he's always done, and that's kind of drive his way and do things his way. But he looking at the testing and looking at him getting interviewed and stuff like that, he just seems, to me, he seems super confident in that. In a way, he doesn't have the same problems that maybe the other teams have, in that he doesn't have a teammate who is really challenging him hard. So he's probably in quite a comfortable position, and that's great news for Max Verstappen. Maybe it's not so great news for Red Bull in that they might not be able to mount a kind of constructors' championship bid, because I don't know if they're going to score as many points as Ferrari and Mercedes in that championship. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting, and I think a lot of people are wanting, someone to come along and really challenge Lewis, whoever that is. I don't know if it's going to be Max. It could be. Let's see.
We'll stay with you, Owen. Talk now about McLaren, and how do you reckon that we didn't really see much from McLaren in testing? They sort of just got on with their business very nicely, but with the threat of Racing Point and Renault, do you still think they have it enough with their package this season to cement that fourth place in the Constructors' Championship?
I think it's going to be much more difficult this year because it's much more close this year. So it's going to be a challenge. I think Renault undoubtedly improved, and it's very clear that the Racing Point car is going to be up there. I mean, I've even read some people saying it's as fast as Ferrari, and I'm not sure if I agree with that. But I guess the hope is that McLaren can develop as the year progresses and kind of maybe eke out some kind of small advantage if they can. But they're really going to have to battle hard if they want to get fourth. So that's going to be one of the question marks over the season, is when the other teams kind of abandon their development and focus on the big changes that are coming in 2021. So that may shape how it goes.
Yeah, surely it's going to be a tough challenge. Dev, with Lando Norris coming into his second season and Carlos Sainz wanting to repeat his his great success that they had in 2019, do you think that McLaren will have better sort of sorted their car for these two drivers now that they've got both now a year at McLaren, so they can hit the ground running rather than their sort of bit of shaky start last season?
I think definitely they can. They have all the year to build up. They have all the year to develop finally the car which they would want closest according to their desire. But I think they still are a very strong contender for the battle in the midfield. In fact, for the top end of the battle in the midfield, if I might put it that way. We saw some terrific races last year, and there's no reason to believe that they can't do it this year as well. But I think the closest competition in that aspect would be between McLaren and Renault, because even Renault seems...
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a tight battle. And Alex, with this sort of midfield battle being so potentially really tight this year, could we see a really fast development race which could potentially close that gap to the top three and see that these midfield teams, challenge for a podium a bit more often than what we saw last year?
I'm not so sure about challenging the top three team. I still think they're a little bit too far ahead, unless Racing Point, with its so-called pink Mercedes, actually manages to, which it could. It's very likely it could. Certainly, Renault are not going to want McLaren to beat them again. That would have been embarrassing for them from the commercial point of view, that a custom team beats the worst team. So that's going to be their target. And of course, it's Renault's last season supplying McLaren. They're going to back to Mercedes engines next season. So whether the relationship between McLaren and Renault will be as strong as it will be exactly the same as it was last season, that remains to be seen. I heard from Lando Norris, he says that McLaren have improved in some areas and in some areas not. I'm not 100% sure that McLaren are going to be leading the midfield battle. I think it's a bit too much to ask for them, as great as Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz are. But I just think, with Racing Point looking as quick as they are, Renault look fast out of the block. don't know. We're not really sure how strong Alpha will be actually. They started last season rather well. It was a bit sort of not where they wanted to be towards the end, but they could potentially be in the mix. But I think the midfield battle is going to be very interesting. It's going to be very close, even closer than it was last year.
So going on to Racing Point, yeah, their pink Mercedes does look very good. Alex, you said that they're likely of getting good positions this year is quite likely. So Dev, what do you think? What do you reckon this sort of Racing Point car has? Like, how much potential does it have?
I think enough potential to basically cause a big upset in the midfield battle, because definitely this is the one team which has been which hasn't really managed to punch above its weight, But I think 2020, one of the surprises that we could really have amongst us would be a great performance from Racing Point, because I think it wasn't long after they unveiled the car, with the livery change and everything, that, there was so many impressions up on social media and everybody was talking about that a lot of work has gone into improving the downforce of the car, to improving the overall traction for this year. So I think 2020 could very well be the year where Racing Point actually did its best, in fact, to give a tribute to their most consistent driver, Perez. I think he certainly deserves a car which can take him to the podium far often than what he's been, in the recent times. Because let's face the fact that he's one driver who's capable of doing more than just pulling up in prize. If you can refer back to several Azerbaijan Grand Prix, right? He at least has 2 podium finishes there. Did we really think that was possible in a car like that? For sure, there were surprises. There were accidents, The Grand Prix over there were always riddled with, complications here and there. We have the famous lap 40 collision between the 2 Red Bull cars. That really helped Perez that year as well. But I think if there's a year where Racing Point are going to significantly up their game, 2020, and it's about high time as well, that we saw Perez fighting in front of the grid instead of improving visibly in the midfield charge.
Yeah, Sergio Perez is an absolute phenomenal driver, but his teammate Lance Stroll seemed to have, even in races where Perez did well last year, Stroll seems to struggle in qualifying and just sometimes just lack that race pace that Perez has. Do you think, Alex, do you reckon that Stroll is going to be putting a lot of effort into the season, knowing that he has a very good car underneath him?
Well, this is Stroll's big opportunity. It's the first time in his career that potentially that he's had a car capable of consistently challenging for points, certainly the better half of the points as well. So he didn't really get much chance to show that. Certainly in 2018 in Williams he didn't. And last year Racing Point were on the back foot a bit because they had a lot of problems with the administrators the year before, which affected the development of 19. But for 2020, it's a totally brand new car, looks very quick, and it's his chance to show what he really can do. He's had a lot of criticism from people who are saying that he's only there because of his family backing and not due to his talent, which is a bit unfair because I think every Grand Prix driver deserves to where they are. So, but I think I completely agree with you and Dev on Sergio Perez. I'm a big fan of Sergio Perez. I think he's a great driver. So he'll be looking at it from a different angle. Because he's been in F1 for a few years now. His chances of getting a top drive are probably going to decrease because there are other younger drivers coming in. So this is his golden opportunity to really shine, I think.
His family got a lot of money, Lawrence Stroll, and he's been going to be pumping a lot of money into this team, Owen. So,
could I just add to one more point since we are talking about Racing Point?
Sure.
I think it's also, from where I see, it's also very fruitful for the sport and its doting fans around the world that Formula One actually brought forth new narratives. And one of the dominant narratives should be, one among the midfielders taking charge of the battle, pushing the top leaders seriously to a point that where they have to fight for every single race to assert their authority. And I think this is what we can expect from teams like Racing Point, which have unfurled this mega RP20. It's just about time that the old stale, and pardon the usage of my word, it does become a stale narrative. Mercedes wins it all. Red Bull comes and packs a few punches, and then Ferrari picks up a couple of wins in the second half. So I think it's important for everybody's interest in the sport, for the sport which is at this point in time exploring new geographies, for newer discussions to emerge. And this can happen with midfielders step significantly up above their weight and give us something really memorable to discuss. That's what I feel.
And that's definitely a great thing that we can see. And, Racing Point now with their new owner, Lawrence Stroll, he has a lot of money that he can pump into the team. So if we have a good foundation in 2020, could we see more from Racing Point?
I think what's going to happen was, I don't know, but what I think is going to happen with Racing Point is that they're going to have an incredibly strong start to the season. They've kind of taken this strategy of, let's say, being heavily influenced by the Mercedes car, and that's fine, and that'll bring you a lot of speed, certainly, and already has. My kind of question mark is, if you take that approach, do you fully understand the car that you have? Do you fully understand how to develop what you have? And again, I think Racing Point might be one of these teams who have taken this gamble knowing that they're going to switch the resources that they have fairly early onto next year's effort. So the question will be, can you sustain what they're going to have at the start of the season? And I'm not 100% sure they can do that, but I could be wrong. They could prove me wrong.
They might do. Now onto the lean, mean French machine, which is the Renault this season. It was definitely a step up in testing from what we saw in 2019. So, Dev, what do you think we can expect to see from the Renault out in Melbourne for the first time, and what they can achieve in that midfield?
I think the RS20 would definitely want to be consistently amongst the top 5 runners in any race. And by that, I mean significantly upping their qualifying game, because that's really somewhere they really need to improve. 2019 wasn't the best year, I would say, for their qualifying battles. But one person in particular I'm really expecting who would come into his own was Daniel Ricciardo, whose start to 2019, if you remember, was far underwhelming than how he finished in the latter half of the season. And with Ocon coming back, the team has both experience and the flair of the master of late braking. So can the Honey Badger return to doing the shoey? Well, definitely not with the coronavirus being around. Not a great idea. But definitely a fantastic thing to do with the new car, because Ricciardo is one guy whose theory, his driving style resonates at times. It fits really well with the engineering expertise he has at his disposal, and let's hope that a concoction of that can give us something brilliant. But I definitely feel that the RS20 shouldn't really be would be anything but a back marker. Would be anything but a back marker for sure, And having said that, if you aren't a back marker, if you have people like Williams who are interested in 2020, then you being Renault have to deliver something special from the. So why not expect something consistently amongst the top 5? That's my theory. I can be wrong.
Yeah, we are expecting a lot from Daniel Ricciardo this year to see what he can do. But Australia and Melbourne track doesn't always seem to be the best for him, Alex. Something always goes wrong somewhere or another. Like last year, he lost his front wing.
Collision, lap 28.
So, Alex, what do you think Daniel Ricciardo can do this year? Will he finally sort of drop this sort of cursed races that he's been having over the last few years?
It is a case of the home circuit jinx. I remember Rubens Barrichello used to have it in Brazil, Jacques Villeneuve did in Canada, and it seems to affect Daniel Ricciardo in Australia. Ever since that 2014, his debut in Red Bull, and he got excluded for the fuel flow problem. It's never gone right for him since. But who's to say that's going to last forever? He could have a good race this season. It's a bit of an awkward situation for Renault, because they really do need to get the result. They haven't had a podium since they came back as a work team. But with 2021 round the corner and new regulations, it leaves a question mark as to what actually can they do. Do they focus on getting the results they want in 2020, or do they look at developing a challenge for 2021? And there's always going to be a problem where they're going the shade of grey between the two. I certainly don't think they're going to have as bad a season as they did last year, and they can't allow themselves to do that. Otherwise, they're going to be in serious trouble. I think the manufacturer will probably question their commitment to Formula One if that is the case. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think Renault are going to bounce back, and I just hope that Daniel Ricciardo gets Australia break. That is been one thing. I don't think you can't really expect miracles from them, but I think a top 6 finish would do them the world of good there.
And Esteban Ocon returning to the sport now after a year out. Been working with Mercedes though, so do you think we're going to see a better Ocon, Owen, than what we saw in 2018, or are we still going to see that same solid driver that will be playing at like a number 2 to Ricciardo?
No, I'm kind of expecting him to be really competitive. I actually think he's probably a better prospect than Nico Hülkenberg. I kind of was slightly irked that he didn't get a drive last year, so this feels like justice to me that he's getting a competitive car to kind of show us what he can do. So I'm looking forward to that. I think the driver pairing that they've got is a really strong one. So yeah, it's good.
As we've been going on for a while, we'll sort of rush through these last 4 teams. So Dev, AlphaTauri, new name, but doesn't seem to be a lot to talk about for AlphaTauri. They just seem to be getting along with their business. Do you think they've fallen behind in this midfield battle from the likes of Racing Point, McLaren and Renault?
Well, I just certainly hope they are easy for Alfa Romeo to better. Speaking personally from a fan perspective, but yeah, look, we don't know. I think especially when it comes to the underwhelming teams, probably we'll have to wait for a couple of races to see actually how strong or how weak they really are, because you never really know what some of these people from the red end of the field can do, and I think we'll have to actually see for a couple of races. But I'm not really sure. For sure, it doesn't really inspire much confidence at this point, does it?
Alex, Alfa Romeo being a team like AlphaTauri just haven't really inspired much confidence. They've just got on with it and then had a few issues in the second week. Do you think that they're sort of falling behind for this, like into like a Haas or Williams battle this year at the sort of the lower end of the constructors?
Well, AlphaTauri seem to be reasonably confident. I think Helmut Marko said that they were no longer a junior team; they were a sister team to Red Bull, which is his word. How true that will be and what that actually means, I don't know. Does that mean they'll be giving the Red Bull team a bit of a run for the money, which I don't think will be the case? Quiet in winter testing, but they're certainly going to want to be doing a lot better at the start of this season than they were towards the end of last season. But they've got some continuity. Raikkonen, obviously, they've got the experience of Kimi, Giovinazzi's settled in within the team now. So the best they can really hope for is putting a consistent finishing streak together, maybe getting into the lower end of the point. But I'm not 100% sure. I think you're right. I think it is going to be a sort of a Alfa Romeo Haas bringing up the midfield battle, shall we say.
And then Owen, Haas, they've completed the lowest amount of laps in testing. They didn't really put any stunning lap times, but I guess the goal for Haas this year is just make their car a bit more raceable, something that doesn't drop like a lead balloon anytime they qualify in the top 10. So how do you reckon Haas do quite well in Melbourne? So do you reckon that they will still do well, or will they just be sort of falling off slightly?
Yeah, well, the winter testing, as you say, was really pretty underwhelming, I have to say. So I'm kind of not expecting much from them, but it'll actually be interesting to see if they end up fighting with Williams or not, if Williams come into that battle at the back there. So yeah, I'm not optimistic when it comes to Haas, I have to say.
But a team that will be hoping for some optimism is Williams, and surely being 4 seconds off the pace is not going to be where they will be this year. So, Dev, how much do you think Williams have improved, and do you think we will see those improvements in Australia and sort of, actually be able to fight with a few cars rather than just sit very steadily at the back?
The winter testing was far too underwhelming to inspire them. Having said that, I think it would be very exciting at the same time to see what the likes of Latifi can offer. And at the same time, with George Russell having all the experience, little that it might be of having competed in just one season, he's now the go-to man, and who knows, there could be a very healthy intra-rivalry within the team which could inspire the drivers to do something better. But at the end of the day, it's just about having the feel of the car and what results unfurl at the end of Melbourne's highly anticipated contest.
It's going to be surely interesting to watch Williams this season. So finally, we're going to end this with our race, qualifying, race and bold predictions for the Australian Grand Prix. So Owen, we're going to start with you. What do you reckon top three, who's going to get pole position in Australia this weekend?
Definitely Lewis.
Alex?
Yeah, I say Lewis as well.
Dev, we're going to make it 3 for 3 at the moment.
I'm going to say Valtteri, but for sure, I mean, there are two people, rooting for Lewis. They cannot be wrong. They have their experience, and we've seen as followers of this great sport what he can pull out. So any which ways, one among the two Mercedes for sure. But let's not discount Red Bull. They might just come up with a surprise.
Personally, I'm going to sort of go along with the sort of Lewis has been on pole. Now, onto your sort of top three predictions for the race. So, Owen, who's going to be on the podium at the end of this weekend?
I think it'll be the two Mercedes drivers and Max. Order-wise, let's go Lewis, Max, Valtteri.
Lewis, Max, Valtteri. Alex, your podium prediction?
Same drivers as Owen, but I think it's going to be Lewis, Valtteri, Max.
Lewis, Valtteri, Max. And Dev?
Could I include one among the rest of the grid in my predictions? So
whoever you think is going to be on the podium. So
when it comes to the podium, for sure, it's going to be Lewis wins the race, but Bottas sets the fastest lap and gets the qualifying, but Raikkonen breaks into top 10. There you go. I've made it very random. But I really think he can do it. He can still do it. He breaks into the top 10. Yeah, that's my third prediction.
Personally, I think it's going to be Valtteri who wins the race, then Lewis, and then I'm going to go, because I think the Ferrari are not as bad. That's going to be my prediction. And finally, go on to a bold prediction. So something incredibly outlandish that you might think that will happen in this race. So Owen, what is going to be your bold prediction for the Australian Grand Prix?
Williams aren't last.
Williams aren't last. Okay. Alex?
Ooh, tricky. I was just thinking of contradicting myself and saying that Mercedes have a failure, which I can't really do after I've just said they're going to finish 1-2. But I'm going to go Renault being best of the rest.
Renault best of the rest. I mean, Dev, you already said that Kimi's going to be in the top 10.
Yeah, but I have another outlandish prediction. Vettel does not spin. Sorry, I love you.
My bold prediction is going to be that Williams, either the Williams, so Latifi or Russell, will make Q2 on the Saturday. I think that's going to be my bold prediction. So, yeah, that's our preview for the 2020 Australian Grand Prix. You can listen to this on the F1 Chronicle website, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, Omni Studio, Pocket Casts, and we have a Patreon and a Reddit if you want to donate any money towards the to this podcast. So thank you, all of you, for being a part of this podcast.
Thank you for being a wonderful.
Thank you.
So the next show will be a review of the Australian Grand Prix. Let's hope it's a good one, because sometimes Melbourne doesn't bring up the best racing. So thank you all for listening or watching. Goodbye.
Bye.
Like,
Bye.